Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
Today's guest is Vince Galko, formerly the Senior Vice President of Mercury Public Affairs, and he's now ascended all the way to Managing Director of Mercury Public Affairs. Vince brings over 20 years of experience and is recognized as one of Pennsylvania's top Republican political strategists. Vince had been the regional administrator for the United States Department of Education. He was formerly a senior advisor to United States Senator Pat Toomey, as well as senior advisor to Congressman Pat Meehan and Congressman Lou Barletta. Vince was the former regional political director for former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani's presidential campaign. Vince was the former campaign manager for United States Senator Rick Santorum's campaign when he won for Senate, as well as a former deputy director of President George W. Bush's re-election campaign in Pennsylvania in 2004. He also served as the executive director of the Pennsylvania Republican Party in 2005. Vince received his degree from St. Joseph's University in International Relations and Economics. I recently attended, by invitation, the Republican National Leadership Roundtable, as well as the dinner with the President of the United States, where he gave an address. Besides attending with my wife Ellen, I invited Vince, as well as Republican Chairman Senator Greg Rothman. We will be discussing that event with Vince on today's show. Senator Rothman will be our next guest when we return the Sunday after Easter, which is Sunday, April 27th. We, as we always are, will be off next week for Easter Sunday, and we will return with Senator Rothman on Sunday, April 27th. We hope you'll enjoy today's show as we look back at the events of the roundtable and the dinner in Washington.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Vince, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Great to be here, Chuck.
Pleasure. And let me start first by congratulating you on your ascension to Managing Director of Mercury Public Affairs. That's a tremendous honor, well-deserved. Our audience knows your resume because you've been on guest, obviously, enough times. But I can't think of, and I'm very pleased to have you as a friend. I'm very pleased to have you supporting the Volpe Report, as you've done great work as its basically political consultant, and now Managing Director of one of the most influential public relations political consulting firms in the country. Your firm produced the chief of staff to President Trump.
Absolutely.
So when you so the audience, I'm not just blowing smoke at you and speaking in hyperbole. No, your Mercury Strategies. I mean, you're in a firm that would be the likes of James Carville, Dave Axelrod, and you're one of the managing directors in such an important state. So today's show, of course, is to talk about an event I was invited to attend, hosted and sponsored by the Republican Congressional Leadership of the United States, the NRCC, as it's known, the National Republican Campaign Committee. And, of course, they had headlining the event, black tie event, was President of the United States, Donald Trump. So, there was a very short list. The tickets were pretty exclusive, as you know. I had 4 of the highest level security clearance VIP seats. And beside my wife, Ellen, my lovely wife, Ellen, attending, I had 2 people I wanted to bring, and you were first call. And the second one was next week's guest. Senator Greg Rothman just left us, but he has now been like yourself, I guess good things happening too. He's become the chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, in addition to being a Senate leader in the Pennsylvania Senate. So the 4 of us went down. And and I'm going to obviously get your take on the events, but just for our audience's benefit, look, the security was unbelievable. You would expect that. They had like 4 blocks closed down. We were in the National Museum. So we get to this event, and we go. They had a grand ballroom, and then upstairs they had a small room for a VIP reception. So there was that we all 4 of us had the VIP reception tickets. And again, we went through like 3 levels of show your ticket, ID, show your ticket. So there was that. I actually left that because I was asked to participate in a roundtable with the leadership of the United States. There was, of course, Speaker Mike Johnson. There was Majority Leader Steve Scalise. There was Majority Whip Tom Emmer. There was the NRCC Chairman Richard Hudson. Now, Mike Johnson, the Speaker Johnson, broke off to one room, and the rest of us went into call a round table. It was actually a square table instead of a round table. And the leadership put on, it was a question and answer, and went around the table, and there was give and take. They explained some of the strategies and the policies that they're pushing. And the big item that was on tap for that, there were a number of questions, but the issue of how important it was to keep their membership together, to push, as the president referred to in his speech later that night, that big, beautiful bill he talks about, which has a lot in it. Yeah. It's tax there's tax cuts that he wants to be permanent, and he's put a bunch of other stuff in it too. And it was pretty revealing that they still have some issues. They shared with us that in their own caucus, there are some members of the what they call kind of, I guess, still the Freedom Caucus. There are a few holdouts.
Right.
And I like your comment because we talked about that privately at the round table. Well, now we go out, of course, and you, I, and Ellen, and Senator Rothman, the chairman, sit at a table. We're right in front, literally right in front of where the president spoke. We had a great table since there were 3,000 people spread out across this giant auditorium. Joining us at our table were U.S. Congressman Dan Muser, U.S. Congressman Rob Bresnahan, our congressman, and some of their staff. So a gentleman named Jim, who I think you knew, was very actually close friends with President Trump. You talk.
Yeah, Jim Worthington joined us as well. Jim's been a tremendous he's businessman for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, very influential businessman, but also a great supporter of President Trump and the party. And if I'm correct, I believe it was actually one of his McDonald's restaurants is the one that President Trump
that's right.
on a campaign trail visited as
when
well.
When he went back with
yeah,
that's right. Jim told me that.
Jim's a great guy.
I sat right next to him.
He's a great guy, good supporter. And I know he's been very helpful to everyone at the table and candidates up down the line.
Right. Also joining us for a while at our table, and then she kind of left and was working the room, was Ashley, who did what you did for George W. Bush, President Bush, back in 2004. Right. She ran President Trump's campaign in 2024. She ran it in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's a real asset for us to have her there because she knows Pennsylvania like the back of her hand. She's really, so whenever you can have someone like that who knows Pennsylvania in a position of influence, very helpful to be able to pick up the phone or send an email.
Sure.
When you need something, can't always deliver, but they do their best. But when you're talking to someone who actually understands, when you mention Nescapec or you mentioned Old Forge, they've been to those places, they understand them.
Mount Carmel.
It's great to have people like that in there.
We were Ashley and I were sharing war stories about some of the people we had in common, and I talked about Kurt Cocadrilli. And, of course, my good friend Elmo Rinaldi, she knew very, very well, who's close with the president, who I spoke to the president. I spoke to the president about Elmo Rinaldi and Kurt Cocadrilli and the relationship with his sons Eric and Donald Jr. So, yeah, it was a great evening. But I get a little bit, that's some of what my take was. I'd like to get a little bit of your take on it.
Yeah, well, aside from the impressive surroundings and the security, whenever you go to an event like that when the president's going to be there and leadership, you think to yourself, I'm in the safest place in the world right now. So it's kind of neat to be in that environment. But, what I took away from it was certainly the grandeur of it all, and we had tremendous seats to see the president speak, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. But, sitting at the table, you realize Northeast Pennsylvania is such a unique position right now. We haven't been in this position probably since Joe McDade has been in office, where we have sitting members who are in the majority in the legislature, whether it's, Rob Bresnahan, Dan Muser, Ryan McKenzie, having Dave McCormick in the majority of the Senate. It means such a difference. And it's also, very important to understand that when you're in a room like that, you and I grew up in Lackawanna County, where we're, a lot of Democrats growing up. It was nice to be in a room full of so many Republicans. Even though we have many Democrat friends and family members, we love them dearly. But it's interesting. Always nice to be in a room full of like-minded folks.
Yeah.
But to go back to what I was saying is that we're in such a unique position to have these people in leadership, and it was great being at the table with them, and they're such great amicable guys to be with as well. But you see the potential that we have here with these people in the majority in Congress and the Senate. So I look forward to what they're going to achieve for our region and our state in the years to come.
Yeah, well, one of the things, back to my interaction at the roundtable, is that, and I actually spoke to Tom Emmer. He came to our table, and I got to speak to him privately about the Volpe Report. He's coming on the show, which was great. And but also back at the roundtable discussion is, letting him know, and Dan Muser actually contributed to the conversation, how important this media market is to them. So the fact that we shocked the world up here in many ways. We shocked the world with Rob Bresnahan going on his 7th term House Appropriations Chairman, popular Matt Cartwright. You knock off a 3 or 4 term incumbent, not quite a squad member, but pretty far left, Susan Wild, gets knocked off by Ryan McKenzie. I mean, if those 2 seats, as they had been continually staying, you remember when Jim Bognet ran, Lisa Scheller took on Susan Wild, they were tough, good candidates, well-funded, they lost.
Right.
If that had happened again, you're now talking about 1 vote,
right,
effectively. And so that's how slim the majority is. So they understood, and as I said, I've talked to Tom Emmer about it. My job was to, look, I need you guys to come and talk to the people here. I know they can watch them on Hannity, obviously, Vince, but they're talking national picture. When they come on this show, I'm talking about Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. I'm talking about Shamokin and Chickasha and Mount Carmel and in those areas. We go as far west as Williamsport in this media market, and Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. And it's good to talk about issues that we care about specifically. They understood, and I have their commitments that they're going to come and talk to folks. They're very intent on holding those 2 seats, of course, and they're going to need to stay in the majority.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the importance of Northeast Pennsylvania in politics, whether it be on statewide or national level, grows every year. You look at the evolution of Pennsylvania. For years, you had Democrats coming out of Philadelphia with big numbers, but they were always offset by the 4 suburban counties. And that was kind of a wash. And Republicans were able to hold their own. They would lose Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, they might lose Pittsburgh, but it was kind of a wash. And then trends changed, and those 4 suburban counties outside of Philadelphia went Democrat. So Republicans had to rely on what was called the T, across the top and down the middle of the state. That's where the Republican votes were, trying to turn out votes there to offset them and squeak out some victories. Now you have a dynamic where the southeastern part of the state is becoming more and more solidly blue, but now this western part of the state outside of Pittsburgh turning more and more red. Problem for Republicans is there's just not as many voters there as there are in other places, which makes Scranton-Wilkes-Barre market even more important. Republicans needed to offset those numbers in the southeast combined with the growth they're having in the southwestern part of the state, and Democrats know they have to block them here. But the growth Republicans have seen in this region is incredible, and that's a testament to great party chairmen and activists and others and elected officials in the region who are doing a terrific job. Even Luzerne County is a Republican county now. I worked for Rick Santorum back in 2000, and part of my region was the Northeast, and I remember we won Luzerne County in 2000 for Rick Santorum, and President Bush, I believe, won, and people were in shock. President Bush came close, didn't win, it became close, but Rick Santorum had won. And I remember Senator Santorum called me up and said, "I can't believe we won Luzerne County." And that was like a harbinger of things to come. And
now it's a solid.
You saw, and Lou Barletta carried that on, Tara Toohill and others carried that on, and now Rob Bresnahan and Dan Muser winning the county regularly. So it's amazing what's happening. Lackawanna County is now kind of the lone island here, Democratic island in the Northeast, and it's changing, and I think you're going to see whether it's campaigns for governor in 2 years or president in 3 years. You've spent a lot of time here, a lot of money here, and the importance of connecting with the people. So I think we should be, instead of complaining about too many commercials or mailers coming in the mail, we should be flattered by that because there are some parts of the state and some parts of the country that don't get any attention come election time. So we should be proud of the fact that we're so important.
Well, to end this segment before we go quickly to break, I'd mentioned Ashley earlier, and you talked about her as well, but not only did she run a campaign for President Trump in Pennsylvania, she's in the West Wing, in the Oval Office, and part of his team. So I invited a few after our dinner. You regrettably had to make that long trip home because of your responsibilities. But I took Congressman Muser, Matt Perricone, his chief of staff, along with others. And, of course, Ellen was with me. Jim joined us, by the way, because he was staying at the Waldorf Astoria about a block from the Capitol where I was. And so there were about eight or so of us at dinner. And Ashley joined us. So she filled us in on some inside stuff. And I'll keep all that anonymous. It's not that it's classified, but I'll keep what we talked about private. But yeah, she made clear we have a friend there, right in the West Wing of the White House, and the president is clearly aware of the importance of Pennsylvania. Hence her appointment to that key position on his staff. So
yeah, and my ride down was a lot different than my ride home. It took 5.5 hours to get there, but 3.5 to come home. A little bit different time of day. So
no doubt. Again, we're here with the newly minted managing director of Mercury Public Affairs, Vince Galko, talking about, as he was my guest at that leadership dinner in Washington, and we heard the president's speech. And when we come back from this short break, we'll talk a little bit about the speech now and some of what was discussed in that room. It was pretty much 3,000 people in black ties. It was a very celebratory mood for the Republicans, as you can imagine, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back.
There are more places you can watch the Volpe Report, your premier political talk show. Tune in to Fox 56 every Sunday morning at 10:30 as we bring prominent national and state officials right into your living room. Or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report, where you get full access to all of our episodes, wherever you are. Our guests are the newsmakers, the decision makers, the people who shape the policies that affect us all. We dive deep into what matters most to Pennsylvanians with in-depth interviews that give you the full picture. We're dedicated to providing you with unfiltered, thought-provoking conversations. Whether it's local policy, national politics, or everything in between, we're right here to break it down and keep you informed. So wherever you want to watch, the Volpe Report is always here for you, delivering everything you need to know in today's political landscape.
Welcome back. Again, we're here with Vince Galko, a managing director of Mercury Public Affairs, and a good friend, attending with me at that Republican Leadership Workshop Roundtable, as well as we topped the evening off, Vince, with an address from the president. And, it was a very friendly room. He spoke for a long time.
He did.
But he basked in it. You could see it was his crowd. And to me, from where I sat, right near the stage, in fact, with you, it was a victory lap. He came in. I've talked to some people not only that night, but even afterwards, and they've asked me my impressions of it. And if I had one word to describe him, the president, confidence.
Sure.
The confidence, oozed off him. So he spoke for a long time. He spent a good deal of time. I've said this to people. I didn't know he was so funny.
Yeah, he was funny.
I mean, like, I'm talking about stand-up funny. Like, and we're talking about a room with spread out. You need binoculars to see from one end this giant hall, 3,000 or so people. A record number of money was raised that night. $35 million was raised in that one night. But he spoke about things, and I want to get your take on a couple of the things that were, aside from the comedy moments, there was a lot of comedy. A couple of the things that he stressed, and I'm not surprised because of who he is, but he called out a few Republicans in that crowd, United States congressmen who are recalcitrant, for lack of a better word, and not quite going along with his agenda. And he referred to them as showboating, trying to get clicks and attention, and grandstanding is a word he used, and showboating, as they said, a number of times. And he pretty much said, we need to get in line. We have, we, meaning, as he said it, we have a historic chance to pass the greatest tax cut in history to help working families. And my one, he keeps saying, big, beautiful bill is,
right.
Remember, and I'll let you talk about this, there have been a number of leadership, some in the House and in the Senate, saying, well, we need two bills. Let's not, let's not make a good bill, the enemy, or the perfect, the enemy of good. So, but he wants one beautiful bill. And so your take on that, a little surprised in that big love fest of an evening for Republicans that my Democratic, roots I still have always a good perspective on that. But I was kind of surprised that he literally called him out. But go ahead.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head, Chuck. I think my takeaway from that night was three things. One, it was a victory lap. Two, it was a stand-up comedy routine. He was very funny. I mean, finding myself cracking up laughing.
I'm thinking about it. I'm laughing.
Yeah, it was great. And I would say he's somewhat of a unifier in that speech as well. As you mentioned, he called on the carpet. Didn't really mention by name.
No, he never.
But certainly the people in the room knew who he was talking about.
He looked at them.
And I think he's telling these folks, we have an opportunity here. But if you're going to be more worried about, getting, Facebook likes or Instagram hits or whatever it might be, or
showboating,
or just being able to get on cable television, we're not going to be able to do this. And the folks that you're going after for these clicks and for these, news hits are not your friends. They've been trying to tear the party down for years. And he was just making a case. I think was it Ben Franklin that said, if we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately. and I think this was a Trump version of that. And so I think he was getting that point across. I also think, it was a chance for Republicans who don't really know him. Even if you're a member of Congress, you don't really know the president. Some do, leadership do, but, you don't really get to hang out with the president. People think you do, but you get to go to events like this and that stuff. I think it was a chance for members of Congress and their staff and other people in the room to see that, Trump is a guy. He's a normal guy, too. And you mentioned confidence. It's kind of, what does he have to lose at this point? They've impeached him twice. They tried to put him in jail for different things. Numerous lawsuits, right?
They almost killed him.
Yeah, exactly. They've tried 2 assassination attempts, right? So he's, he feels I have a finite amount of time to get things done here, less than 4 years at this point. And even more so when you realize, the midterm elections are in a year and a half. So if he loses one of the chambers or if he loses some members,
he's a lame dog. It's
going to get more difficult to achieve. So he realizes he has, a limited amount of time. And I think that it's incredible to me. We lose, sight of the fact that it's been roughly 60 days he's been in office, a little more than that. And everything the country's been through and all the, what he's done, previous presidents on both sides of the aisle didn't accomplish in 4 years. And he's not always right, but I think his strategy is, let's move forward. If we break some stuff along the way, break some stuff along the way. But we have a finite amount of time on this earth. I have a finite amount of time in this office. If we don't start improving things for Americans, it's only going to get worse. And he's making the most of it.
No doubt, Vince. And back to one of the things I learned at that roundtable also, by the way, I forgot to mention is that very day, earlier in the day, he had summoned several members of the Freedom Caucus to the Oval Office. Mm-hmm. He had them, sat them down right in front of him and pretty much said, I need you to support this. I mean, we've got to stay strong. We've got to stay united. I know, again, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, we're not getting perfect, but we're getting most of it and to support it. So, the other thing I think that really I want to get your comment on and bears mention is that, he talked about, he was, as I said, my impression was, if I had to pick one word, confidence. He went out of his way to talk about the Democratic Party's lack thereof. He said basically that they're destroying themselves, they're a mess, and I wholeheartedly agree. I use the analogy, of course, we're taping the show on a day when after all of the storm clouds were gathering about his tariffs, 90%, 80%, 50%, and I'm cheering him on to a degree because, now I think up to 50 nations have contacted. The Prime Minister of Japan was going to fly over. In fact, he was there, I think, yesterday to negotiate directly with the president to talk about the tariffs on Japan. And just when their heads are ready to blow off, the National Democratic fake news media and the Democrat leadership, he announces yesterday late that he's taking the tariffs down to 10%, except for China. Right. He moved up to 125%. And again, their heads blew off. I mean, because now the stock market just exploded, record gains and across all things. And now the Democrats, he literally has them running into each other, Vince. So your comments on that?
Yeah, I think people don't understand about Trump, or they forget, is that he's a negotiator, he's a businessman. So he's
part of the deal.
He always takes the extreme position and works to get an acceptable deal in the middle. So every time he does it, the liberal media, the Hollywood elites, whoever it might be, take the bait. And this is what he means. No, he's going to stake his position. He's going to work backwards. If you start in the middle, you're going to lose ground. So he stakes the extreme. So I think that's very important. And the fact that, as you mentioned, the Democrats have gone to such extreme on various issues, whether it's the wokeness and I think the part, I know you want to talk about this, is that when he brought out the prisoners, the hostages.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Again, making the point of where, they were stuck there for almost 498 days. These three people were stuck in underground chambers.
Raped and tortured.
In Gaza. And we brought three of them on stage with him that night. And that was really moving because it was a kind of a raucous crowd, lively crowd. And then you could hear a pin drop. And each of these three hostages took their time, spoke, told their story. One hostage talked about his younger brother still there, praying to get him out. And they were all so grateful because I think the one gentleman said, we lost hope. We had heard, through whispers and other things in our torture chambers that Trump had won the election. And the day he won the election, all of the prisoners, we had hope that, we finally have a chance. We may get out of here. So, to hear that from people, not from actors, not from politicians, but from people who actually just spent the last 498 days underground being tortured and other things, say those words was really compelling.
It was a moving part. All of them had tears in their eyes. The one gentleman, they all wore yellow scarves, symbolically. Mm-hmm. And the one gentleman, who spoke the longest, crying, kept breaking up and had to stop. He kept having to pause because he couldn't get the words out, thanking President Trump for the courage and for the leadership and for doing what it took to get them out of there. And they made a point to say that apparently there are 59 people left, 33 of which are alive. And the heartfelt way they said, but you have to understand, these Jewish families want even their dead children returned home. So, and the only man that could get this done, and they all turned to him, they all hugged him. And yeah, it was a moving thing, and it shows, as we run out of time now, Vince, the contrast is what the Biden administration and the Democrats catering and basically shaming themselves to get Palestinian votes, for lack of a better word, in the congregations of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, who hate this country. And instead of being loyal to the Judeo-Christian values and the Democratic Republic of Israel as they should be, I said something. I don't know how any Jewish American can vote for a Democrat. I don't know how they can do it. It's amazing. If they were at that night, they would not have been able to do it, right, as we were. Well, Vince, our time is gone. Thanks so much.
Great to be here.
Now managing director of Mercury Public Affairs. You're moving up in the world. And I feel compelled to say to our audience that not only are you a managing director of one of the foremost political consulting firms in the country, I could say that, but Susie Weil actually, from Mercury, your company, ran President Trump's national campaign for president and now was appointed his chief of staff, arguably the most important piece on the chessboard, right, in his administration.
Yeah, she's a great colleague, and we're very proud of everything she's doing.
Yeah, she's doing a great job helping him with his 106 executive orders already. But at any rate, we'll be back next week. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. We'll be back in 2 weeks. As always, in a tradition on this show, we always break for Easter. This is a show that firmly believes in the Judeo-Christian values of our country and what it was founded on, and therefore Easter is a special day. So we will be off. But we'll be back the following Sunday with our good friend, Pennsylvania Senator Greg Rothman, and newly minted elected chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, talk about his ascension to that position. And we have midterms and a governor's race around the corner, an awful lot to keep him busy and all of us. So we'll see you then in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.